Many of us say it's dying we fear, not death. Ron Delbane, nationally known spiritual director and teacher based in Birmingham, Alabama, teaches us that God is present in dying as in living. Knowing this, we can embrace the dying process and be fully there for each other.
In the process of death and dying, it's not uncommon to experience moments for which there are no words. Some people are more aware of these moments than others. Some are afraid of them. Some talk about sensing God's presence. To explore the sacred in death and dying is to be alert to the holy, to be aware of those sacred moments, and to look for the deeper meaning. In recognizing the sacred, it's important to be aware that there are moments in our conversations and in other interactions that lead us more deeply into an experience of life and death. Being present to the person with whom we are sharing provides an opportunity for us to be more aware of those holy moments. Drew tells us of the relationship between his presence and God's presence.
I was asked to volunteer with the American Red Cross to go up to Vermilion, South Dakota to do a Help the Children Heal hotline. And I was visiting with a chaplain at the hospital up there, and I saw on next to his desk a statue. It was a statue that one of his chaplains in training had created after she had experienced a death in the emergency room. And it was a boy who had fallen off of a swing and hit his head and came into the ER and had died there. The image was of the father with the son laying across his lap, and the father was bent over his son with his hand on his chest and another hand under his head, and the child's arms just laying out to the sides. And behind the father was this Christ image. And the image had his arms and his hands spread around the father and the son, but they weren't touching him. To me, was a pretty significant image, one that I felt very connected to, that God is very present with us in those times, though we don't necessarily feel that presence. The figure was not touching them, but was very much there. And that's significant for me. I think that as a chaplain in a setting like that, we convey that presence of God, that's what our role is, to remind them that God is in that place.
Chaplains are not the only people who are called to be present to others. Chaplains are not the only people able to be symbols of God's presence. A twin sister or a good friend can be that symbol, as we see with Maggie and Patrick.
For Libby and I, praying together was really talking. It was sharing the intimate, dark moments at night when everybody was gone and the pain was there and the fear was there. And she couldn't share that with other people. She couldn't share that with my mother, who couldn't see it, who wasn't there, who couldn't accept where Libby was at. It was sharing all of those really tough moments when fear really comes in. I mean, it just comes in so heavily that we prayed, sometimes we sang together.
Lee being 32 when he died was hard for him to accept in the beginning of his illness, but as we got closer to the end, it became easier because of the pain, and we laughed a lot about the pain. And that's one thing that in death, we laughed. We laughed an awful lot about the fact that he was going bald, to laugh about the fact that he looked like an 80-year-old man and being 31 at the time. There was always laughter.
Because Maggie and Patrick were being present, they were able to explore some of those sacred moments. Being present to the pain, and the prayer, the darkness, and the laughter enabled them to move more deeply into the holy. There are many ways we can move into the holy with others. I'm reminded of Janai and Harriet, Harriet had asked Janai to be with her as she was dying. And in that process, Janai asked Harriet to tell stories of her life. Janai told me she was struck with one story that kept reoccurring. It was the story of a favorite black velvet dress that Harriet had worn to her junior prom in high school. Over and over that story came up. Over and over, Harriet talked about the fabric, how she used to hold it and loved to see herself in it and the feel of it. That prompted Janai to go to a fabric store and buy a piece of black velvet and bring it to Harriet in the hospital. It became a powerful image of peace and joy to Harriet, so powerful, in fact, that she died holding it. There are many ways that as we are present to people, that we can explore the sacred. It may be with a piece of black velvet, but it also can be in the ordinary, routine things of daily life, where we work, where we live. What we are called to be is to be present wherever we are and to be attentive to those holy moments.
Recent job that I've had in the last 2 years, that's a little bit more difficult to leave death, just leave it at home, you know, because you take sick patients home with you. You think about them over the weekend, you know, but then me, I remind myself, you know, well, you know, I really don't want to think about it right now. You know, it's a sad situation, but I'll get back to that, you know. Sometimes that's really difficult to do. You become a little bit hesitant to talk about your feelings, you know, and what you've gone through, you know, experiencing somebody that's close to you and die.
And even though you as a staff there at the clinic are dealing with death every day, you really hadn't taken time as a staff to talk with one another about what death was about, had you?
No, here we are, we're faced with it every day, and we really don't sit down to talk about our own feelings, you know, about how we feel about death. Even what we did, you know, sometimes with a patient, when the patient was facing death, what did we say, you know, to the patient? You know, what was the best thing to say? Is there a best thing? You know, is there a right and wrong thing to say?
And where are you in that? What's happening inside you at a time like that?
Most of the time, I feel a great deal of empathy and sadness with the family. Sometimes I feel some anger of here I am again in this place. You know, why does this have to happen to children, whether it's an accident or an illness? A lot of times I'm aware of my own fear, particularly if it's a child that's the same age as of my son. A lot of that parallel process for me calls up a lot of my own fear and reluctance to even want to be there. And I also find that it calls up a lot of my own grief experiences.
Peggy and Drew, professionals in their field, struggle like most of us do with being present to the moment. They struggle with thoughts of people, places, and other times, trying to crowd in on that moment. And they struggle with being present to that person at that place in that time. It is not easy to be present. But our call is to be as present as we can be in all situations. How can you be more present to others in your life and work? Being present is one way of exploring the sacred. Another way of exploring the sacred is listening to the inner voice. Most of us do not listen to our inner voice for a variety of reasons, from family, culture, heritage, our work experiences, and lack of skills. We not only don't listen to our inner voice, but sometimes don't even hear our inner voice. So this is not an easy task. Carlton is a chaplain at a retirement facility. He is visiting Mary, one of the residents who is in the hospital dying. In his conversation with her, she says, "This is it." He responds, "What is it?" And she says, "I'm going to die." In this conversation, Carlton struggles to listen to his inner voice.
And I began to feel tense inside. There's always a sense of wanting to do the right thing. And at the same time, recognizing the sacredness and holiness of the transition from this life to another life. And that's a time when my faith really gets put to the test, because what I feel doesn't always match what I think. And so that time with her was kind of a struggle within myself in trying to decide, am I going to do what feels right with this person, or am I going to do what my head says is right?
This is a classic example of the dilemma. We find ourselves caught hearing so many voices. We talk about these voices in terms of mind and heart, or thinking and feeling. It is so difficult to identify our own inner voice in the midst of all those other voices. But it's precisely that struggle which enables us to be more attentive to others and to help them in their struggle as they clarify hearing their own inner voice.
Although we were the only two people in the room, there was this sense that there was another, or there were others that were watching, whether it's parishioners or parents or whomever, but somebody's watching to see if I'm going to do it right. And at the same time, there's the awareness that if she's really going to die soon, then nobody's going to know what took place. I mean, I'm worried about doing the right thing, and yet at the same time recognizing that, God and myself are the only two that are going to be around to tell anybody.
It's not uncommon to have our mind filled with questions. What do I do now? Am I doing it the right way? What if someone were watching? The dilemma is, how do we identify and listen to our own inner voice? Like Jacob wrestling with an angel, Carlton wrestles. He seeks to come to that quiet place where he can stop the wrestling, identify his own inner voice, and begin to act in new ways. The beauty of what he does is so profound, I believe, that I asked him to write down exactly what went on in the conversation so that he could share that with us in this conversation about being present, listening to one's inner voice, and exploring the sacred with another.
When she said, "This is it," I asked her, "Are you ready to die?" And she said, "Yes, I'm afraid, uncertain. I'm ready for the pain to end," because her illness had caused a lot of pain. And at that point, I thought of all the things I learned in seminary and clinical training that I should say. But I just said, "I'll miss you, but I'm glad that you will be free from pain."
The core of the dilemma is that we are caught between our old behavior and our new behavior. When we listen to our inner voice, almost always we are called to risk and to enter into a place of mystery. Our new behavior is a mystery, and it also is scary. But as we move into that fear and through that fear, we not only become more attentive to the moment where we are, but we also empower the other person.
Then she looked up at me and said, "You're a special person." And at that point, again, all these tapes and things started going through my mind that I should say. Somehow it just dawned on me that saying that was my stuff, and I needed to be with her where she was. And so I just sat there, didn't say anything, just held her hand.
Most of us have grown up hearing that it is more blessed to give than to receive. And so when we receive a compliment, we usually find it difficult. Accepting a compliment is honoring the person who gives it. Carlton was able to honor Mary by accepting the compliment, be at ease with her perception of his specialness, and continue to be with her in her process.
After a while, she said, "I'm going home." And I just said, "Home?" Kind of questioning for clarification, what did she mean by home? And she said, "With God." And at that point, I just said, "I know." And then she looked up and said, "Pray." And again, there was that, now what should I pray at a time like this? I thought about all the prayers I've read, and that didn't seem to be important. And so I just wanted to, again, trying to be with her where she was. The prayer I prayed was, "Loving God, receive your daughter into your loving arms. Welcome her with the gladness of a homecoming. Grant her rest. Thank you for the hope we share. Thank you for sharing her with me. Amen." And at that point, Mary said, "Thank you," closed her eyes, and I just sat there for a while with her while she went to sleep. And then I left, and I found out that a short time after that she died.
Carlton's example is a powerful model. Carlton had the courage to wrestle with that inner angel and listen to his inner voice. He was aware of what he called his own stuff and chose to remain focused on Mary rather than himself. He listened to Mary, stayed present with her. He listened to his inner voice, made new decisions, and trusted new behavior and responses. When are times when you listened to your inner voice?